Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of the High School Golf Podcast. I'm Crystal Morse along with Ted Bishop, and today we are going to have a discussion about how coaches can help players build their confidence and work through a fear of failure, which is very evident in a lot of high school players. Ted, we have three specific points we're going to cover today. We are going to start with point number one, which basically has to deal with when to approach swing changes in players. We're doing that a lot in our off season. Let's talk a little bit about how and when to approach swing changes in your players and how that can help build confidence in this off season and get them ready for spring golf.
Well, Crystal, I think when you're talking about major swing changes, those need to take place in the off season. And I don't know how many different areas of the country that listen to this podcast, but the golf seasons may vary in length. And for our boys, our season runs from March 15th to basically June 15th. For the girls, it's a lot shorter. It's August 1 through the first weekend in October. So there's really not a lot of time, particularly with the girls, to implement full-blown swing changes. Maybe a little bit easier with the boys early in the season, but I think that, when you're in season, the things that are easiest to change in a player and that can have a profound impact on their performance on the golf course would be the grip, the aim, and the setup. And obviously the grip would be the correct position of their hands on the golf club. And I think one of the things that we consistently see is a lot of players have grips that are way too strong. It's kind of interesting with kids versus adults. I feel in my experience teaching people golf over the past 5 decades that a lot of adults conversely show up to that first lesson with a really weak grip. And it's different, totally different with juniors. So a lot of times we're weakening the grip of juniors, boys in particular. The second thing would be the aim and the position that you're putting the body in when you're standing over the ball. It's amazing to me how many people line their feet up at the hole and not the golf ball. And if your feet are lined up at the hole, then obviously the ball is usually way to the right if you're a right-handed player, way to the left if you're a left-handed player. And what you should have is a series of parallel lines from toe to toe with your hips and your shoulders that are going to be parallel with that target line, which is the line that goes from the target back to your ball. That's very simple, pretty basic stuff. And then the setup is simply ball position. Where is the ball located in your stance? And depending upon what club you're hitting, that ball position is certainly going to change. Now, when we get to the out-of-season time, then I think more profound changes such as posture, swing path, some of those things are going to come into play because you're just going to have a longer period of time to try to make corrections or fix these things with a player's swing, and because it does take longer. And I know that's kind of an area that you probably have a lot of thoughts on.
We have the luxury now of being able to see our players' ball flight, even though it's on a simulator. We can still see how that ball is going to react coming off the club face. So number one, yes, we do have the numbers that we can look at, their swing path numbers and a lot of other numbers because we do have the use of Sportsbox Studio, which tells us about their body movement. Are they turning enough? Are they swaying too much? Are they lifting too much at the wrong spots in the swing? So yeah, we look at all that. But for those that may not have that equipment or those numbers or that data, you really need to be able to look at your player's ball flight. And the ball flight is going to be something that is really, it's dictated by fundamentally their grip and how they take the club back. Now, there are going to be some other factors that obviously we could have an in-depth discussion about, but if you're really just looking at how can I improve a player's ball flight, those are going to be the two things. When you talk about a strong grip, you're going to talk about a grip that creates a little bit too much of a right to left ball flight. You may see players overdraw the ball or hook the ball. And I'm going to talk about being a right-handed golfer just because I think majority of the people are, but obviously you can switch that around for left-handed golfers. Really focusing on ball flight. When we talk about the takeaway and how the takeaway affects ball flight, you're going to see in general somebody who takes the club way outside their target line and kind of gets disconnected, you may see that create a little bit of a slice or a fade. If somebody takes the club way inside their target line, that potentially, I mean, it could create a hook, it create a push. So a lot of different ball flight errors in that sense. So Ted, you like to do, and we do this with a lot of our players, one specific kind of thing that we focus on their takeaway. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this is called the set drill. SET, the set drill. And there are some great online explanations of how to do the set drill, some really good videos out there. This is a part of Justin Thomas's swing that has been very successful for us to incorporate into a lot of our players, both male and female. The set drill is very simple, and it's a lot easier to see these pictures that are online than what I'm going to explain, but I'm going to try to keep it as simple as I can. You're going to basically, on the initial takeaway, you're going to set the club with the last three fingers on your left hand. You're going to put the shaft in a parallel position with the ground. You want the toe of the club actually a little bit outside or even with your hands. And you want your hands to be pretty much even with your right thigh. Again, these things are very easily identifiable when you look at these pictures that you can see online or even some videos of Justin Thomas and how he's incorporated this in his pre-shot routine and actually his swing. But what this does is it immediately puts the club in the correct position. And then at that point, you're just going to raise the club up with your shoulders to the top of your backswing. And I've used this saying to many, many players over the years. You're never going to hit a shot with your backswing, but what you do in your backswing is certainly going to dictate what happens in the downswing. And I would say this about the set drill. It really has become a staple, certainly in the way that I teach, and I feel like that we have been able to take a lot of kids who are athletic players, and they can easily incorporate this set drill into their swing, and it has been an absolute game changer for several of our players.
Absolutely. And let's talk about how this helps build confidence in players. And so when you're talking about the offseason and making these changes, one of the things that helps players build confidence is understanding their swing and knowing maybe what their patterns are in their ball flight. Do they consistently fade it? Do they consistently draw it? Maybe there's some other patterns in their swing that you see. Helping them understand these patterns. For example, we have some players that take the club too fast to the inside and they get a little flat and they really set themselves up for just an inconsistent shot. So helping them understand, listen, this is your pattern, especially in a pressure situation. You get too quick on your backswing and you get the club in a bad position, which creates this push or creates this hook that gets you into some trouble. So I think having that discussion of this is your pattern and this is how we're trying to fix it or how we're trying to improve it and helping them understand that is one of the first steps in helping them build that confidence when springtime hits and when the season hits. Basically, that's the number one thing that when talking about coaches of any skill level or of any experience level, getting your players to understand their patterns and understand their ball flights. Ted, talking about that kind of leads us into point number 2, and that is basically the use of off-season practice to train the brain. And that leads really right in to what we do a lot in the off season and talk a little bit about things that we do for players who struggle to take their game to the first tee and what we do to kind of train their brain, hopefully to build confidence and combat that.
Yes, I think anything that you can do with your winter training to actually simulate what's going to take place on the course during competition is really important. And I think the thing that this winter we have probably done the best job of emphasizing to our players is building a pre-shot routine and practicing it while they're indoors in the wintertime. And what we see with a lot of players when they're indoors hitting balls is it's like rapid fire. They're just raking one ball after another, firing balls into the screen, maybe taking a quick look at their numbers and making the same swing. And to be able to take some of these swing changes that we're trying to incorporate in a player and make this transition from inside to outside as easy as it can be, then I feel like it's very important that you duplicate or emulate all the things inside that you want to do when you're outside. And certainly when you're playing, a pre-shot routine is a major ingredient to good success. So again, I would get back to this set drill. What I would have players doing who are utilizing the set drill, which honestly right now, Crystal, is about everyone that I'm teaching on both of our teams, then I would have them walk into the ball, but I would have them be about 6 inches further away from the ball than they typically would be. And I would have them go through the set drill on a full swing and make a practice swing utilizing that set drill. Then I would have them get behind their ball like they would if they're going to play and identify their target and their target line and then walk into the ball, set up, and then I would have them make one more what I call a rehearsal set. And this is where they just take the club back, basically as you would in step one of that set drill, where you're cocking that left wrist, the shaft's parallel to the ground. You're making sure the toe of the club is outside your hands. You're making sure your hands are even with your right thigh. And then you return the club back to the ball. And what we emphasize to the players is, okay, now you're ready for your real takeaway. All you're trying to do is put the club in that same position at that spot in the backswing where that set would take place. And it's amazing, what you've done is you've utilized the set drill in its full entirety on that practice swing. You've utilized the rehearsal set. So you've had two practice points of putting that club in the correct position in the backswing. And what we're trying to do is create muscle memory. So with two practices and then one actual swing, it's amazing how close these players do come to putting the club in the correct position on the backswing, and it correlates to a good shot. And this is a pre-shot routine that we would build in the wintertime that we would take right outside so that they're going to feel like they're just doing the same thing they've done successfully all winter long.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is having that discussion with the players, having that time to say, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create this pre-shot that is going to help you build confidence and build this routine that you can rely on in these situations, because tournament situations, you're going to feel more pressure. Generally, what we see players speed up. I don't know if I've ever seen a player slow down when they're under pressure. I've never seen that. So generally, players speed up, they get quicker, their swing gets out of whack when they're in pressure situations and they know that they have to execute this shot. That's kind of what's going through their brain. And that is the whole purpose of that discussion over a pre-shot. And we talk to them about the importance of that and how it helps them with their pressure.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough that great point that you just made. This pre-shot routine that we're developing is all about creating good tempo. And when you're nervous and you're a little bit apprehensive out there playing on the golf course, the first thing that happens, as you said, is you speed up. So if we can utilize this pre-shot routine and this rehearsal set to help a player's tempo, which I firmly believe that it will, then we're really going to try to put that player in a position where they can succeed. And what I would say is if you're utilizing this set drill, you've never done it before, and you're trying to incorporate it into some players, and you're having a problem getting that player into the initial position that they need to be, it's probably because their takeaway is too fast. And that's the consistent thing that I see with players who are trying to adopt the set drill, is they're just too quick and they can't stop the shaft in a parallel position, 2.5 feet off the ground. But it gets back to good tempo, like you said.
All right, Ted. So we've talked about how to build confidence in a player through making swing changes at the right time, which is during the winter time, during the off season, not making any big swing changes during season, really just focusing on aim, setup, and grip during the season, getting players to understand their ball flight and their patterns. That's going to be the number one thing you can do during the off season to help your players build confidence. Number two, basically the use of off season practice. One things we obviously are big on is developing that pre-shot routine, and how having a good tempo and having a good pre-shot routine is something that is going to help your players build confidence and take that game to the first tee. And another thing, kind of point on that, is make sure when they get to the driving range that they practice this pre-shot routine. Maybe not on every shot, but every third shot. Have them go through their pre-shot routine. That is going to help them take their game to the first tee And the third point that we're going to talk about helping your players build confidence and overcome this fear of failure is, as a coach, raising their performance threshold. So, Ted, why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would define that as keep pushing the player to achieve more and try to get your players out of their comfort zone. And I'm kind of motivated with that statement by what we saw from Philip Rivers on Sunday when he came back and played for the Colts. And it was great to see the interaction that his high school team had watching him play in his first NFL game after 5 years. And he talked a little bit about this in his post-game press conference about, people always have two choices. You can either run away from the challenge or you can go after it, and you just can't be afraid to fail if you go after it. And I think that's one of the things that as coaches we can all do a better job of. And that is making players feel comfortable when they fail, edifying them when they fail. You played a difficult golf course. Okay, you shot a big number. It's okay. The next course you play, it's probably going to seem easier based on what you just dealt with. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the things we do to try to put our teams actually in a position where they might fail at a midpoint or early point in the season, so it will benefit us when we get into the postseason.
Yeah, we talk a lot about playing in summer tournaments and putting yourself in these challenging summer tournaments, whether it's 2-day tournaments, regional tournaments. It's going to be different for every player because every player is at a different level. But playing in difficult summer tournaments and putting yourself in positions where you're probably not going to win this tournament. You're probably going to be playing against kids that may be a lot older than you that are getting ready to go into college or whatever it may be. So that's going to be a key component. Now, we do have some players, Ted, that are successful high school players that do not play a challenging summer tournament. Maybe they have to work or family vacations and that just don't allow them to play a tough summer schedule. So we do, especially for our boys, it's hard to do with girls because their season is so short. But for the boys, we set our schedule up to kind of help those players and put them in these challenging situations early on in our season.
My good friend Tom Watson tells a great story. When he was 15 years old, he played in an exhibition match with Arnold Palmer at the Kansas City Country Club. And when they got done playing that day, Tom's dad asked Arnold Palmer, "What can my son do to become a better player?" And Arnold Palmer's answer was, "Tournaments, tournaments, tournaments. You can't play enough tournament golf." So I think that's great advice. But again, I just get back to this basic component of making players feel like it's okay to fail. And there's a lot of very successful stories, whether it's in politics, whether it's in business or sports, about people that have failed multiple times. And then, at some point in their career, they did something that was very successful, and it put them really on the top of their profession. And there's a quote from Derek Jeter that I love where he says, "You can't let failure define you. You have to let your failures teach you." And I'm just a firm believer that no matter what you're doing, if you're not someone that puts yourself out there, you take risks, and those risks are relative to high school golf. At the end of the day, you're going to benefit from all that stuff, and it is going to make you a better player. And I know certainly in your experience as a player, I'm sure you've felt some of those same things.
I think that's so important for the growth of a player. Now, what we're seeing in a lot of high school players is I think the pressures are different on them now than they were back for me when I played. I just see a lot more pressure for kids they feel like they have to get straight A's. They feel like they have to go to this certain college. They feel like they have to have their whole life figured out and what they want to do for the rest of their life when they're a teenager. I see that a lot more now than I ever felt or did back when I was growing up. So I think that's a change just in our culture, in our society. But one thing I think it has not helped them deal with that fear of failure. And that's something as coaches that I think we kind of struggle with. And so I'm just going to give a little shout out to parents. If you notice that your child is not comfortable getting out of their comfort zone, that they're maybe feeling this pressure of failing, or help them through that. And that's really going to help them in every aspect of their life. One thing that I see is a lot of kids are afraid to maybe make some of these swing changes, or they're maybe afraid to put themselves out there in these tournaments. Again, because they don't want to disappoint their parents, they don't want to disappoint their coaches, but having that conversation with players that it's okay if you don't shoot this perfect score that you think you're going to shoot. We just want you to go out. We want you to follow your process. We want you to do everything that we've been working on you with, like over the winter time. Just execute your pre-shot routine. So having those continual conversations with players that it is okay to go out there and whatever number you shoot, we're just going to continue to keep working and do better next time.
Yeah, and the interesting thing to me about players in team golf letting the fear of failure kind of drag them down, it's kind of funny. It depends on where you're at in the lineup. And I have seen in team golf the most pressure a lot of times be on the 3, 4, and 5 players in the lineup because they have this sense that if they do happen to have a bad day, that they're going to drag the rest of the team down and they're going to cost the team a finish or advancing, whatever the case may be. Then with the good players, obviously they have a chance in team golf in almost every tournament at every level to advance as an individual, no matter what the makeup of their team is. So that creates a whole different type of pressure. It's individual versus letting my fellow teammates down. And I really feel like that pressure of letting your fellow teammates down is far greater than the individual pressure that you feel as a player. If you fail, the only person you let down was yourself. You alluded to the parents and other people in your life maybe, but it gets back to what every sports psychologist has said when we've had them in and talked to our players, and we've had 2 really good ones that we've exposed our teams to, Dr. Bob Winters and Dr. Rob Bell here in Indianapolis. And the fundamental thing that all sports psychologists talk to golfers about is just executing the next shot, forgetting about the last shot. Execute the next shot. It's about the next shot, the next shot, the next shot. It's about the process, as you said. And if you can really get players to buy into that frame of mind, and we've had some unbelievable success stories where we actually had players go out and do that, and they had no clue what kind of score they actually shot at the end of the day. And usually it turned out to be maybe the personal best that they had ever had. But that's the mindset that you need to really strive to get your players into to avoid some of these mental pitfalls that are really a staple of this game of golf that we're talking about.
To kind of go back to our scheduling, it's really worked out to where we have these hard tournaments in the very beginning of our season that honestly allows our players to kind of experience that struggle or maybe that failure. And then it allows us as coaches to build them back up as the season continues.
We're getting ready to start our boys season. We're actually in off-season conditioning beginning December 1st. But the boys season, Crystal, is really kind of, in my mind, divided into 3 parts. We have this time that we're in now. The season officially starts March 15th. We go through all this work. We have a couple of good weeks of practice. We don't have any competitions for a couple of weeks. Everybody goes on spring break, and we don't get a lot of golf in over spring break. So everybody comes back, and now it's like we're starting over again. And hopefully we've built some kind of a foundation that we can immediately pick up on this second part of the season. And the second part of the season involves some really tough 18-hole tournaments that we will play on the road. And they can be tough based on the weather that we're facing here in Indiana in early April, but they're going to be tough as it relates to the course and the setup that we play when we go to the Hall of Fame tournament at Rock Hollow in Peru, which is a very difficult golf course. And this year, when we take our boys to the state preview at Prairie View. These are going to be 2 events that are going to kick everybody's butt that are playing in the tournament. A lot of good teams, a lot of good players, not going to be a lot of great scores. And you have to understand that when you go into it. And then it's like when those 2 tournaments are finally over with at nearly the 1st of May, the weather starts getting better here in Indiana. Our schedule kind of winds up being a little bit more home loaded that last third of the season as we get ready to approach the IHSA tournament series. And then I feel like the experiences that we have had playing hard golf courses in rough weather really make the last third of the season seem a lot easier than what our players have dealt with. And even on a smaller level with our girls, because the season's shorter, we have a couple of tough tournaments at Hickory Stick and the state preview that are just as tough, relatively speaking, for the girls as they are for the boys. We like to get these things over with early in the season. And I think as coaches, we know in the back of our minds that we probably are setting our players up for failure. We're going to have to do some psychological rebuilding after these tournaments. We try to draw on everything positive that took place and just try to sell them on the fact that, look, these are tough, these are hard, but these are going to make things seem easier for you when we get to the end of the season. Fields won't be as tough. Courses might not be as tough either.
So really just going along with raising your players' performance threshold, challenging them, getting them out of their comfort zone, raising your expectations, and having those conversations with them early on, saying, hey, this is going to be challenging. Those are things we can do as coaches to just help them through that fear of failure and, just getting them to really hopefully reach their potential in high school golf. And obviously some of that's going to depend on the age of your player. You're going to build that. If you have underclassmen and freshmen, it may take a year or two, a couple seasons to kind of build that, but you're going to see it. And the fun of coaching high school golf is being able to see these players develop over those 4 years, if you can get them to buy into it and really seeing their progression. As we wrap this up, to kind of summarize this for everybody, number one, how and when to approaching swing changes during the off season, getting players to understand their swing and their ball flight is going to be one thing you can do to help build their confidence. Number two, basically training the mind and the brain to take it to the golf course. Working on your pre-shot routine, getting players to really work on their tempo and their routine going into their golf shots. And then number three, helping each player raise their performance threshold, challenging them, setting them up for challenging situations that force them to use that pre-shot routine and get them to understand that failure is just part of the process. We can definitely help them through that. It requires a lot of discussion and kind of understanding your players. But hopefully everybody has gotten a few things from this podcast and helped you to kind of coach up your players in the off season and get them into a good spot for when season begins.
Yeah, and I just would, again, I'd like to thank people for the input that we have had here in the last few weeks in between these podcasts. And I think you told me the other day that we've had listens from 33 different states and maybe 11 different countries, believe it or not. We value this input, and if you've got anything that you'd like for us to talk about, you can reach me at tedbishop38pga@aol.com.
And you can reach me at crystal@thelegendsgolfclub.com. Thank you for listening to episode 11 of the High School Golf Podcast, and we'll look forward to next time.